Hello and welcome to History Blenders that Change the World. What I'd like to do today is to talk about the incredible contributions of scientists who fled the Nazi regime in the 1920s and 30s. Upon coming to power in 1933 as the Chancellor of Germany, Hitler made immediate plans to dismantle the Weimar democracy that had been in place. He enacted one legislation after another. One of the key pieces of legislation was the law for the preservation of the professional civil service. This meant that everyone in government positions who had at least one Jewish grandparent would lose their jobs. This led to thousands of people losing their jobs, and many Jewish scientists lost their positions in academia, teaching, in the court system, any judicial type positions like lawyers and judges, and then same with the government bureaucracy. Between 1930 and 1941, over 1,100 Jewish scientists left Europe for America, including 12 Nobel Prize winning scientists. 7 of them were Jewish scientists. The most famous scientist to flee was Albert Einstein, but other notable names include James Franck, Eugene Wigner, Otto Meyerhoff, Niels Bohr, and many others. In fact, this list is just a small sampling of all the scientists who had to flee. The first impact that the new scientists had in America was the construction of the atomic bomb. While many believe that Albert Einstein had been a part of the U.S. nuclear program, that is not true. Einstein was not involved, but he was fearful of what Hitler was capable of in terms of developing a deadly new weapon. Therefore, Einstein, with other scientists, wrote a letter to President Roosevelt in 1939 urging them to fund an initiative to research atomic energy. His famous equation, E equals mc squared, explains the energy released in an atomic bomb, but doesn't explain how to build one. So while Einstein's involvement was very marginal, he did help to spark the Manhattan Project. Einstein had been a pacifist, and he was devastated with the news of the bombing of Hiroshima. There was an illustrated Time magazine cover of Einstein with the atomic explosion illustrated in the background, and this cover really upset him. In the end, he regretted even writing the letter. In an interview with Newsweek magazine, Einstein said that had I known that the Germans would not succeed in developing an atomic bomb, I would have done nothing. Before the war, German physics was much more advanced than American physics. In fact, a number of American graduate students would spend time in Germany to study under prominent physicists. One very prominent example of this would be Robert Oppenheimer, who later becomes head of the Manhattan Project. He had, as a young man, gone to Germany to study under Max Born. Here are the scientists who fled Germany and eventually enabled America to be the first to develop nuclear weapons. James Franck's role in the Manhattan Project was as director of the chemistry division of the metallurgy laboratory. In Germany, he had made discoveries in the structure of atoms and molecules and quantum chemistry. In 1933, when the Nazi regime came into power and dismissed all Jews from civil service, Franck was exempted because he had been a veteran of World War I, awarded the Iron Cross. However, in protest against the dismissal of his fellow academics, he resigned anyway and moved to the U.S. Eugene Wigner was a theoretical physicist and mathematician born in Hungary and based in Germany. Here he made groundbreaking discoveries in pure mathematics, creating a theorem that is a cornerstone of quantum mechanics. He is also known for his research on the structure of the atomic nucleus. He was recruited by Princeton University in 1930, and considering the conditions in Germany at the time, he decided to make the move. For the Manhattan Project, Eugene Wigner led a team whose task was to design nuclear reactors to convert uranium into weapons grade plutonium. One of the most important to the American nuclear program was the Italian scientist Enrico Fermi, known as the architect of the nuclear age in his creation of the world's first nuclear reactor, the Chicago Pile 1. This allowed for a slow and controlled release of atomic energy. Fermi was one of very few physicists to excel in both theoretical and experimental physics. In 1938, he was awarded a Nobel Prize in Physics. In the same year, however, Fermi escaped fascist Italy's new racial laws that affected his Jewish wife. Fermi's work on the Manhattan Project was crucial to the development of the atomic bombs. Niels Bohr was a famous Danish scientist who escaped the Nazi occupation in 1943. He worked on the British nuclear weapons development team, and he made frequent visits to America to consult on the Manhattan Project. These scientists enabled America to win the race to develop nuclear weapons. In the end, the main fear that the Nazi regime would develop this superweapon was unfounded. While the Nazis did put together a nuclear program, the remaining German physicists, as brilliant as they were, had not been able to produce a reactor or an atomic bomb. Some have even speculated that the German scientists may have deliberately delayed the effort, but this idea has not been substantiated. It is clear that the German nuclear effort lacked not only the supplies and funding that the U.S. Manhattan Project had, but it also lacked the collaboration of the world's top physicists. German physicists had to endure a military leadership that cared little about their scientific research and was more focused on getting money to spend on troops and planes. Historians also believe that the Nazi leaders may have put their nuclear program on the back burner due to the Aryan superiority complex. They thought they were invincible and therefore didn't really need a superweapon that they didn't understand. Of course, the Manhattan Project changed the world. However, many of these scientists go on to regret their work in developing such a horrendous weapon, and they advocate strongly for peace and the regulation of nuclear weaponry. Many of them only heard about the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki on the news. The exiled scientists go on to provide important mentorship for the next generation of scientists in America. The nature of science requires learning in a mentor protege environment. In looking at the U.S. Nobel laureates, by 1977, 48 of the 92 Americans who won a Nobel Prize had worked in some capacity with these scientists who had fled from Europe. A third major impact of the migration of scientists to the United States has to do with renewed vigor in research of biological sciences. This new type of grand proclamation in the biological sciences was a direct result of the migration of many physicists due to fascist oppression. Three physicists in particular, Schrödinger, Szilard, and Delbruck, and a biologist named Luria, were all instrumental in groundbreaking biological discoveries. While it is true that the intellectual migration strongly influenced American science in a positive way, it is also true that the expulsions affected German science in a negative way. While the post war conditions would account for the decline in German science, there can be no doubt that the mistake of needlessly persecuting people not only had short term effects on the war, but also significant long term effects on how the countries developed. Thank you very much for watching History Blenders. Please give us a like and subscribe.